Hey everybody, welcome back to part 5 of my intro to real-time caustics in Unreal Engine 4.27 series. In the last episode, we reviewed how to build our glass materials, enable the caustic effects in the lights, and set up a simple scene. Now, today, we will be progressing and taking everything into the sequencer and rendering it out in the movie render queue. I'll also be covering my presets and how to use them in the movie render queue. So, without further ado, I'm going to open up the cinematic tab and bring in a cin camera actor. And then I'm just going to try and position this at an angle that I like. So if I can select this, there we go. Then we'll just bring it up, and I'm just going to kind of experiment a little bit with the framing. So alright, we're getting closer. Yeah, I think from a slightly upper angle so we can see more of the caustic effects on the ground is a really good way of doing things. And then I have spent a lot of time recently using vertical for rendering because of social media. So I'm just going to swap these two values of the source width and height on the camera, and that should give us a vertical view that we can use on social media. Then I'm going to center the cone's rotational area on the screen because we want the cone to rotate. And then I'm going to scale this plane up just a bit. I'm going to paste that so I can pin that so that I can see it. And I'm just going to scale this up so that we can see it. You could use a cyc, but I'd rather just use the defaults for what's in Unreal just to get started because I feel like it's easier. So there we go, that's looking good. And we can see those wonderful caustics on the ground, looking great. Looking great. Okay, come back to content, Control-Shift-N, and let's call this sequencer. In the sequencer folder, let's come in here and we'll make an animation level sequence and call this capital S. And then, let's see, caustics, let's call it first caustics. Okay, there we go, let's open it up. And then here, this is kind of like your timeline in other creative apps. So let's switch this to 24 frames a second film. Then ensure the movie render queue is assigned as your render export. Okay, then drag your camera into the sequencer. And here we're just going to adjust the focal length to ensure that it's right on our cone and the caustics. I want it kind of centered on the caustics. So right about there's looking pretty good. Let's bring it back forward a bit. There we go. That's pretty perfect for me. Then hide that, and then let's come in and let's keyframe that. And then let's also bring in our cone. So just drag in the cone into the sequencer as well, and let's add a slight rotation to it. I want this to be loopable, so we're going to loop it at 360 over the course of these frames. So starting with the start, let's just keyframe where it's currently at in the yaw, and then let's bring our cursor to the end of the timeline at 120 frames. That should be 5 seconds, and let's just add, so just type in plus 360 and it should do the math for you in the text box. Then let's select these and let's make them linear. So right click and then select the linear. This just ensures that they're going the same speed the entire time, and this allows us to keep these cones rotating forever. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I like how the caustics are moving. I like the different flow of the light. So let's just come back in here. And one thing I'm not liking is how much reflection we're getting. We're not getting very much, so let's just add a bit of metallic to it. Yeah, 0.5 seems okay. And let's just play it back and see what it looks like. You know what? I want to go to 0.2. Yeah, so let's just adjust this to around 0.2, and then 0.3, 0.2. Let's stick with 0.2. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now we just have a bit more reflection on the outside, as well as adding a slight metallic value does increase the amount of dispersion and caustics that you get. Let's open our movie render queue now, and let's click on unsaved config. Okay, so real quick, let's just set our output to vertical. So let's swap the 1080p and 1920. Okay, that's looking good. Now I want to show you something else about JPEG and the sequences. So if you delete something and then you accept it, then if you reopen it, it's there. But if you close the movie render queue and then reopen it, it always adds a JPEG sequence. I don't know why, and if someone can tell me why, that would be super helpful. But in the meantime, let's just add some presets because I like to work fast. So I'm just going to create a new folder and call it movie render queue. And then after this, okay, I'm going to navigate to the project file. So in here, mesh caustics, content, sequencer, movie render queue. So now we have the same folder open that's in the content browser. And then you can download my movie render queue presets for Unreal Engine 5 or 4 on my Gumroad. They're like $1. And then if you paste them into the folder, then you should see they pop up inside of Unreal Engine. And now you can use them inside of your sequencer and your movie render queue. So let's just load a ProRes vertical. Now ProRes generates a MOV file, so it doesn't render frames. So that means that if it does crash, then you have to re-render. But for this quick situation, I'll do it because it's a lot faster. And then let's come to our console variables, and so we'll see that these lower bottom ones cover all of the dispersion and caustic settings that create the best result for us. So here you can see those, and then I've been collecting a series of settings and configurations and tips and tricks that I've been compiling into this document, which will be available in the description for free. And we want to have a DLAA. It's different than DLSS. Then I set my Apple ProRes to 422 because for at least this situation, we don't need a ton of data. And then you can set your temporal sample count and anti-aliasing to 16. You can set it to 64 or something even higher for a really good result, but I'm going to stick to 8. Make sure that none and override are checked. So now we're just going to here in the movie render queue view, you can see your total frames, the elapsed time, the frame, and then your subsamples. Subsamples are reliant upon the anti-aliasing number you add, but here we can also notice there's no dispersion in our caustics. So let's quickly close this. Let's come back in here, and in here, basically according to my testing for the last couple of weeks, I found that changing the dispersion samples to 5 gives better colored dispersion results, whereas a 10 gives you clear white caustics. So I've written that in the documentation here, just explaining why in a little bit more depth. But we'll move forward now, render local, and boom, you can see the wonderful colors emerging in our caustic effects. This is just for your information so you know how to use it. So once it's done, you can navigate to the folder, and then I like to use DaVinci Resolve to edit my videos. So I'm just going to do something super quick, like add a small S-curve to it. So let's drag in our MOV file, and if you try and open these MOVs that are exported from Unreal, they don't open because Windows doesn't have the codec. But anyways, from here I'm just going to change my product settings to vertical, so we're going to switch this resolution to custom, and then 1080 by 1920 instead. Click save, and then from here we can see our video will replay. Now I'm just going to come into the color tab and just add a very slight S-curve. Just kind of tweak it a bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Okay, now to the render tab, and let's just rename this to first caustics, and then I'm going to make sure it's set to MP4. I'm going to just save to my desktop for this example. Save, and then everything is looking good, so add to the render queue and click render all. So very quick, not a lot of depth in why I use DaVinci, but DaVinci is one of the best color applications, and so this is your final result once you export it from DaVinci and Unreal. I hope you're happy with your result. Hey everybody, I hope that you enjoyed building your first scene in Unreal Engine with caustics, and I hope that you found it
it easy to follow and successful in your renders. If you did have any problems, please drop them in the comments and I will try and answer and help you solve those problems. In the future, I will be producing an advanced caustics series where we go over the water caustics and how to build the prisms, as you saw in some of the demonstrations from NVIDIA, and utilizing them in a more commercial environment, such as a client project. Anyways, I hope that you guys had a great time. If you guys are interested in more, follow me on YouTube and Instagram, where you can see my daily explorations as well as my YouTube tutorials that I post every time I find something that I feel like there's not enough information about.